Hello, genealogists. This is Craig, and this is Just Genealogy. And I got a request to explain something. So let me share my screen, and I'll show you what they were talking about. So here we are out on fold 3, and the person they're looking for is David Stover. And this individual, according to this general index card, which is found on fold 3, as you can see, was in the 1st Regiment Connell's Virginia Militia in the War of 1812, and the individual was a sergeant. Now, this general index card will lead you to a compiled military service record in the National Archives. The compiled military service records for the War of 1812 are not available on fold 3 yet. And largely it's because they're not on microfilm. You can only go to the original records. So, but what else can you do outside of going to the National Archives or ordering the compiled military service record? Well, we have some clues here. He's in the 1st Regiment of Virginia Militia, and that's Connell's Virginia Militia. So let's come back to me. And if we look in A Guide to Virginia Militia Units in the War of 1812 by Stuart Butler, this is a 2nd edition, revised and expanded. The 1st edition was much tinier than this, about half this size. Stuart Butler is a retired archivist from the National Archives, and I used to believe 30 years ago that he and I and maybe 4 other people were the only people who cared about the War of 1812. There are other people now, but 30 years ago it didn't seem like there was anybody. So when we go to the index and we look up Connell, and I always deal from back to front when dealing with this book. So in Appendix 2, it says that the Virginia Brigade of General Joel Leftwich, October 1812 to April 1813, and this is the Northwestern Army Command. And in that command, there are 2 regiments. One is under the command of Lieutenant Colonel John Connell, and he's from Brooke County. And at this point in time, that's Virginia, but today that would be West Virginia. And that there are companies under the command of Captain Louis Bonnet from Ohio County. I know Louis Bonnet because we have books about him, or at least his ancestors, somebody named Louis Bonnet. It's probably a grandfather that we have the books about, although I'm not sure. Captain John Elson from Brooke, Captain Isaac Heskell from Hampshire, Captain Jesse Ice from Monongahela, Captain Benjamin Jeffrey from Ohio County, Captain James Laidley from Wood, Captain John McWhorter from Harrison, Captain George Park from Hampshire, Captain Josiah Peck and Captain George Davis from Harrison, Captain William Prince from Wood, Captain David Pugh from Brooke, and Captain Michael Yocum from Hardy. So as we can see, looking at all of these captains, all of these are Western Virginia captains, all counties which after 1863 would become part of West Virginia. The 2nd Regiment was under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Dudley Evans from Monongahela, and the 2nd Regiment pretty much also is all from Western Virginia also. So if we look further, we see that he is part of the Brooke County 103rd Regiment. So that may not help us. And we can see the other folk that are in Brooke County. And if we look further, we see information about Connell's action in the Northwest Command and the action of Leftwich. It seems that on the 2nd of September, of 1812, the Secretary of War, Eustis, requested from Governor Barber up to 1,500 troops to assist the new Northwestern Army, then forming in Ohio under the command of General William Henry Harrison. Harrison's army was to replace the one surrendered by Brigadier General William Hull to the British General Isaac Brock at the fall of Detroit on 16 August 1812. Governor Barber appoints General Joel Leftwich of Bedford County to command a brigade of Virginia Militia from the counties that I talked about and a few others. and to march to Harrison's aid. That's where that ends up. And I think pretty much they end up, that Virginia Brigade is going to end up at Fort Meigs. And there is a state park in Ohio, Perryville, I think, or Perry, Ohio, or something like that, but in Northwestern Ohio, Fort Meigs. And it's as I say, it's a state park, and it operates. I've visited it. It's a nice place. We sell books there often. So that's pretty much how far we could have gotten. But there's another place to go and look. And that place is Real Patriots and Heroic Soldiers, General Joel Leftwich and the Virginia Brigade in the War of 1812. Now, you wouldn't know that normally, but I know that because that's what my job is. So this book is also by Stuart Butler, and this details what Connell did while part of Leftwich's brigade. So when we look at the index for Connell, and meanwhile, we're still trying to track down David Stover without going to the archives. There's a whole bunch. I mean, there's a quarter of a page of index that deals with Connell. And when you look in the index, you don't see David Stover's name, except there are two indexes. And one is an index to the brigade rosters. So if you go to the index to brigade rosters, there is mentioned on page 237 a David Stover, and he's a second sergeant. And what that means is generally in a company, there are four sergeants, a first sergeant, a second sergeant, a third sergeant, and a fourth sergeant in this time period. So David Stover is a second sergeant, so he's the second most senior sergeant in the company. And there also is another Stover there, and it's Benjamin Stover, and he's a private and becomes a corporal on the 15th of November of 1812. And whenever I see a company where surnames are similar or the same, I have a hypothesis that they are related to each other, which I have to test, but I would imagine that Benjamin Stover and David Stover are kin and have some sort of relationship. And when I look at the name of this company, it's Captain Michael Yocum's company. And remember that Captain Michael Yocum was from Hardy County. And it served from the 15th of September, 1812, and mustered out at Fort Meigs on the 10th of April, 1813. So they had to hoof it back from Fort Meigs to get back to Virginia. So we have a list of everybody who is in the various companies in Leftwich's brigade, Connell's 1st Regiment included, and I think this was the 10th company. But in this time period, companies are known by the name of their commanding officer. So this would be Yocum's company of Hardy County Militia. Now we then can take this and backtrack into Butler's book and go look at Hardy County, and there we see that in fact this is the 14th Regiment of Virginia Militia, and it's under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Jacob Van Meter from about 1809. And there are, in fact, 3 companies in Hardy County, one under the command of John Cunningham, and it's a troop of cavalry known as the 3rd Cavalry, and then a company under the command of Captain Moses Welton from 8 February to March 21st, 1815, and then the company of Captain Michael Yocum, November 15th, 1812 to April 9th, 1813, and part of the 1st Virginia Militia under Connell. So what we've learned from this, and we're fortunate to be able to have books like this relating to the Virginia militia units, and there are some other states that have books like this, but not very many. And his book on Real Patriots and Heroic Soldiers, and them going to Fort Meigs in Northwestern Ohio during this time period, we're able to learn more about David Stover than just the index card. So what we've learned so far is that David Stover was in the 1st Regiment, Connell's Virginia Militia, that in fact the company he belonged to, which we would have learned had we gotten the compiled military service record, was Yocum's company. And because of Butler's book, we're able to learn that Yocum's county was actually from Hardy County. We also learned that Yocum's company went to Fort Meigs, and in fact the soldiers were discharged from Fort Meigs. So there's another place to research and visit. And we also have a book on what the Virginia Brigade actually did during that time period under the command of Joel Leftwich. Basically, we took 3 facts. Oh, we also learned he was a 2nd sergeant, not just a sergeant, but a 2nd sergeant. Not much difference, truly, but the 2nd sergeant. So based on a general index card, we were able to convert that into other information outside of the compiled military service record, which we don't have yet. My recommendation at this point is to go to the National Archives and get a copy of the compiled military service record, although pretty much what we're going to learn from the compiled military service record is the information that we already have from other sources. That would not stop me from going and getting the compiled military service record, although I might not pay for it. I might wait till I actually got to the archives to pick it up. So this is Craig. This is Just Genealogy. Send me your records. I'll talk about them. There are nuances. For example, you can't look at this card and know about Joel Leftwich. But I can, because I know. And part of my job is letting you know what I know so that you know it too. Anyway, this is Craig. This is Just Genealogy. Hope you had a good time today, and we'll see you tomorrow.